Hey everyone, welcome back to another one of my videos. My name is Deliora, and today we are going to be once again revisiting a story slash comic slash in general just story that I have. I don't specifically know what media I would like to portray it in. Most likely a comic, maybe even an animated show if I get really lucky, which, I doubt, but whatever. Anyway, I've done a video about these specific OCs before on my channel, which is the OC Rants of a New Journey video. If you would like to watch that, you can, but it is not necessary information. I'm gonna go over all the basics again in hopefully a more coherent way. And yeah, in general, I'm just gonna get some of the basic stuff down, and then we can get into like the nitty-gritty specifics. So our main cast is Juniper, Caspin, Callum, Joel, and Neil. And this is our group of good guys. They're the protagonists, the ones who are actively trying to help people, and some of my favorite OCs ever. Some of my oldest OCs as well, because Juniper specifically has existed since I was in 6th grade. She wasn't called Juniper back then. In fact, her name used to be Millie, and she had a much worse design. But overall, she's stayed mostly the same personality-wise. Her design's changed quite a bit, as I hope it would, since she's just so old. But some of the characters are more recent. And because of that, I would like to do a video where it's very broad and just, you get basically all the base information in case this ever does become something more than just a story I like to think about in my head. So this is just what I'm gonna get into. So if we were to arrange this in a comic idea, essentially the first chapter or so would be about them gathering the first 3 members of our little party, which are Callum, Caspin, and Neil. Callum and Caspin are brothers. Callum is the youngest brother. He's very energetic, very kind, very shonen anime protagonist. Think Monkey D. Luffy, think Son Goku. That kind of vibe in general is what I was really wanting to have, because the other characters I felt were a little serious, and I like Callum's character being the glue that really holds the group together, and also him, being a little more silly while also still, advocating for a cause, right? So we'd meet Callum first. He'd be actively discussing a recent event that occurred quite near their hometown that led to the deaths of a few people, caused by the other kingdom that the 2 kingdoms are currently in a cold war, kind of. It's a not full-on war, but it's getting there, right? Callum is appalled. He doesn't like it when people get hurt. He's a very empathetic person, and so obviously he goes to talk to his brother about it. His brother is a little more level-headed, Caspin is, and in general he's a lot more logical than his brother. He's a little less impulsive, maybe a little more grumpy, but they end up talking about this event quite a bit, and they get pretty fired up, and they want to do something about it. So what can 2 men do about this? Not much, considering neither of them are very smart, and they don't have a lot of life experience, as they've been living in this town their entire lives. So, not great. But you know who is smart? Neil, and that is our next character. Neil is a bookworm. He likes books. Books are a comfort thing for him. He works and lives in a library,
with his two dads who are currently in retirement. He essentially runs this library, and he's very good at it. But he's been doing that a lot. He's quite introverted and doesn't really go out to party or anything. He's very... This is a weird comparison. He's very, like, first season My Little Pony Twilight Sparkle. If any MLP fans are in my audience, hello. You're lovely. Anyway, this video is gonna be so weird. But yeah, so he doesn't really have a lot of life experience, but he is very knowledgeable about general things you can learn from books, right? Very book smart. So they go to him, and Neil essentially reveals how long-standing this war, or again, not really a war, because there's not really a lot of like interaction between armies or anything, but how much this conflict has been ramping up in recent years, and about how the opposing kingdom is getting more and more bold in how they are attacking the kingdom that Neil, Caspian, and Callum live in. Which is not great. It also doesn't help that this opposing kingdom is spreading their ideology and, in general, just causing a lot of issues and inner conflict in the lands. And so they decide to do something about it. At first, they decide, oh, we're just gonna go and, spread awareness of how this is bad and how, something must be done. But it slowly turns into they are the leaders and, like, the not most impactful, but really the one that spurs everything to life. The rebellion against this other kingdom. And so they travel out of their town and they go to this big city to continue to spread awareness. This big city is closer to their kingdom than the other, but has been quite corrupted by this opposing kingdom. Such as half-bloods like Neil, who is a half-owl, snowy owl boy, aren't exactly treated very well. There's a lot of classism and straight up just racism in this area that, so Neil is not being treated very well. And Callum, who is very directionally challenged, accidentally gets lost when Caspian and Neil go to buy supplies for this journey that they're gonna go on. And as Callum gets lost, he runs into what seems to be an arena. Now, Callum, being not the sharpest tool in the shed, is like, oh, it's like a party, like a giant, like, theater. And then he goes in there and he sees a very strong half-blood who's essentially demolishing all of the competition within this coliseum. And that, my friends, is Joel. That is how we are introduced to him. Joel is quite a tall, gruff man who gets slowly more softer and compassionate throughout the story. But Callum is immediately infatuated. Not romantically, though, because he's not. But he's essentially like, wow, you're really strong and you're great, and I would really love to be friends with you, because, again, shonen protagonist. This is his job in the plot. Joel is immediately very put off by him, but once Callum kind of gets in trouble for talking to the, like, not like prisoner, essentially, because Joel doesn't want to be there. He's not getting paid to be there. It's just you live longer and you get food if you win, so that's what he does. But once Callum starts being like, wait, you don't want to be here? Let's just leave then. Joel kind of trusts him a little more and is like, yeah, sure, there's at least two of us. We could probably do it. They do not do it. Then Callum and Caspin quickly realize that, man, Callum is just gone, and they have no idea where he could possibly be. They end up finding him, and Callum explains that this is his new best friend Joel, and that no, we are not allowed to leave without him. And so they all break out of this coliseum, making an enemy of this city's government, who is allied with this other kingdom. So they already caused quite a bit of problems with that. But essentially, Joel then joins the party, new party member added, and it's great, right? It's great. But as they start to travel and their quest becomes slowly less of we're spreading awareness and more of we are literally starting to fight against the enemy forces as a group of 4 dudes from a tiny town. This is quickly getting out of hand, and although Caspin really, really wants to help, he doesn't think that they can do it alone. He doesn't think that's realistic. He's being a little pessimistic about it. And Callum, who is extremely optimistic, is quite offended at this, and they get into a little spat about it. I guess it's not really a little spat, because Caspin leaves the party. Yeah, he just straight up leaves them and essentially says, if you're not gonna listen to me and care about my input, we're not doing this together. I'll do it myself. Which he, again, quickly realizes is also not realistic. And he can't do that. But as he is deciding to travel a different way than they were originally traveling, he gets into this really tiny, snowy village on one of the little valleys of a very snowy mountain, which I am currently forgetting the name of the town at the moment, but what have you. He immediately is recognized by some of the guards who he beat up in the town where they met Joel, and is promptly chased into the snowy forest, where he is in quite a bit of danger because he's by himself and is not used to the snow. They don't really get snow in the home that they were. And then we get the meeting of June and Caspin, which is great. I love them. I'll show some comic pages or like concepts that I have here that explain it, but essentially, Caspin and June kind of run into each other on the opposite sides of a lake. They're both getting chased down by the same group of people. I don't know why I'm gesturing, you can't see my hands, but, and then June falls into the water, which it's freezing cold, and she is definitely going to die if no one does anything. Granted, the people who want her dead, who are chasing her, are completely fine with her dying there. But Caspin is not, because he is he's a good-hearted person, and he doesn't want this random girl to die. Which, I think is a pretty good trait for our secondary protagonist to have. And he goes in, saves her life from, like, a monster that was in the lake, gets them both out, is astonished that they are both not dead, somehow. And then they introduce each other to... They introduce themselves to each other. There we go. June is essentially like, hey, it looks like we're getting chased down by the same group of people. But also, I'm bleeding and pretty sure, like, that's, like, poisoned or venomed. The bite from the monster is not looking so good. So they go into the town, they get to the healer. Caspin is like, I can't do this by myself. It's poor girl is injured. There's no way I can do this by myself. He apologizes to the group. Everything's fine. And then they go to save him because, again, he is being actively hunted down by the guards. Which they will be too, but, strength in numbers and such, right? And so they go off to do that. And they get to the town. They meet up with everyone. Everyone reconciles. Everyone meets June. And June is essentially like, hey, I can't walk for a little bit. Do you mind if I, stay with you guys? It seems like we have a common enemy. Neil, who is so happy to have someone smart on the team, is like, absolutely, that's great. They're best friends. It's great.
In general, everyone's pretty happy to have another member because of strength in numbers. Joel's fairly standoffish towards her just because he's not very trusting, because of his whole backstory. But in general, they all get along fairly well. They end up deciding not to go over the mountain and instead to go down towards the desert region. They end up going to this town and hearing about an oracle service run by these two other characters. And they decide that they could probably use some future seeing. They could use some help because they're a little in over their head with the whole accidentally leading a revolution sort of thing. And in general, they start trying to find them. They end up finding the brother of the group, who, and I'll insert some art of him here. And he ends up taking them back to his sister, who is the one who can see the future. A little bit of background about these two is that they are scam artists. His sister can see the future, but it's not an on-command kind of thing. She very much needs to find an important person or experience a certain thing that triggers this future sight that she has. But her victims don't need to know about that, so they end up just completely scamming people and getting a fairly good gig going until the group comes in, and she ends up having the most intense future seeing that she's ever had, which freaks her brother out. Basically they freak out and tell the group to get out of town, just leave, because they're a little fearful of what the message, the future sight, means, because it's very vague. It's not really it's not very helpful. So the group ends up staying in town for a few days to try to figure out what to do next. They meet up with the group again, and these two people who have calmed down since then decide, okay, we can probably help you, but we're gonna need some insurance that we're not gonna get mixed up in your whole stuff. They do a few tasks for the town just to gain favor, I suppose, and they end up helping them get to the port city, where they meet another important character. So once they're in the port town, they need to acquire a boat to get to the other continent, because these continents are very close together. I'll insert the map that I've drawn. They're very close together, but you do need to go on a boat ride to get to the other one. There's a lot of trade going on. It's a very thriving portside town. And shocker, this portside town is full of guards from the opposing kingdom, which immediately leads to a really fun chase scene. So they end up running away. They end up finding a boat and just getting on it and leaving, basically stealing a boat. Little did they know that this boat is run by a pirate named Bex, who I will insert some art of here. Uh, she's not very happy that they stole her boat. She's a fish person. She's not really like a mermaid. Because I imagine that mermaids are like a separate thing. This is more of like a half blood thing. Um, she's a half blood, and she basically is able to like swim onto the boat and like tries to fight them, and then shenanigans happen. They end up agreeing to like not fight on the boat. And then they're able to like help Bex out and get to the other continent, which then leads to a whole other like shenanigan thing in that port town, because again they're getting closer and closer to the other kingdom, which means there are more and more guards that they have to deal with in varying ways. And they end up hearing that the nobles of all of the kingdoms of this world are going to be coming together in this port town to have basically like a party of like mixing an event, right? They know that there's going to be a lot of really useful information like set at this event from the various kingdoms, and they decide that they are going to infiltrate this town. This event, not town. I can talk. They end up pulling enough money together to get June an outfit made, because basically she's the one who will be able to pass for some sort of nobility. Neil and Joel can't do it because they're half-bloods, and that would immediately be like really not good for them. Caspin is not social enough and not able to like, he's a terrible actor. He's terrible at like lying, so that just wouldn't go well. And then Callum's an idiot. So June was basically like the only option for this. So they end up getting a like outfit made so that she can convincingly pass as a noble, and it just so happens to be like a masquerade kind of thing, which is good for her because her face needs to stay covered. Because backstory reasons, right? They end up getting her into this event, and she ends up getting a lot of really useful information that they can then use and like travel from this event. She's able to like stay undetected at this event, like the guards don't try to arrest her or anything, which is explained later in said story. But at this event we also meet two very, very, very important characters who are Isha and Luther. So Isha is the princess of this enemy kingdom. She's the heir to the crown after the queen passes. Eventually, she'll be the heir, and Luther is her husband. They have like a very like Morticia and Gomez Adams like situation. They're like so in love. They're very much like that trope where two characters are just like making out in the background, and it's like kind of gross, but also like they love each other. They're very that. Luther is a sad little emo boy. He's also one of the only characters who has like a voice claim. I've seen a lot of people like talk about like voice claims for their OCs, and I realized that I don't really have any. I haven't really found anyone's voice who's like particularly perfect for any of my OCs, except for Luther. His voice claim is Steve Valentine. If you've like heard him talk, like his voice is just perfect for Luther's character. So he's also one of the few characters that was inspired by that actor. like that actor's voice inspired Luther's character. Normally it's the other way around. But yeah, at this party, we end up meeting those characters who end up being very important because they are the leaders of this enemy kingdom's army. They're very important because they're like leading basically the charge. They're leading all of the like bad things that have been happening to the other kingdom. And they end up finding this group and start hunting them down towards, I guess, the end of the comic because they're on the other continent now and there's not a ton of like story left. They do end up escaping from this portside town and this party, not without quite a bit of like strife and fighting, but they end up escaping, right? And this is where there's a little bit of a like blank spot in the story because there's an area, but I haven't fleshed it out enough to like tell you guys what's going on in that area. There's specifically like a swamp druidy kind of area that I do want to flesh out. I haven't fleshed it out thus far, but I plan on doing so. Then there's more mountains, more snowy mountains, because that's been so good for this group thus far. And they end up... Ooh, I don't know how much I want to actually like spoil here. They end up meeting some very powerful allies, is how I'm going to put it. Very powerful allies, powerful characters who are very helpful in the upcoming battle at this other kingdom. Once they get off of the snowy mountain, which they spend quite a while on, they end up running into a temple. Now, there's not a lot of temples. This is the only temple that they end up going to in the story. There are more on the continent. They're just not important to the story. But this is where they end up taking a few weeks to plan and kind of like rest, because this part of the comic gets really busy and I needed a point where like they weren't constantly in danger. Like they needed a point to rest. And this temple is where they end up doing that. Is the temple of the love goddess. And this is also where I take the opportunity to introduce Joel's love interest, who I'm going to put some pictures of here. He's not really... His type is very specific. So he hasn't really been very... like, oh, this person's cute, this person's pretty. He's not someone who's just like very easily... I don't know what the word is, but you guys know what I mean, right? Unlike Neil, where Neil is just like, oh, everyone's pretty. And unlike Callum, where Callum just is like, I don't want romance at all, actually. Joel finds like very specific people very pretty and very like interesting to him, and he ends up meeting his future love interest here. They end up getting very close over the few weeks that they spend at this temple. There's also just a lot of like other fun character things happening at this temple, because I do want to say here that Callum is asexual and aromantic. That's very important to his character, and this is where at like the love temple, I do want to write a scene where he feels something is wrong with him. Like he is not experiencing like romantic love in like that kind of way, and he feels very like outcast because of it. And I this is an important scene, not only because him being ace is important to his character, but also because I want to write some emotional depth into his character, and I feel like this scene will help with that. But yeah, canonical, he's arrow ace. Neil is pansexual. And then June and Caspin are both bi. I'm gonna put a chart of what they are here because I made that at this point. But yeah, they spend a bit of time at the Love Temple before they are eventually found out that they have been staying there, and Isha and Luther like find them out. And this is probably one of the part this like battle that they have here is probably the one that's most fleshed out because I've been actively making an animatic. Wow, I can't. I'm just gonna insert pictures and like little clips here. An animatic. Why can't I say that word? I've been making an animatic of this specific area to the song Doomsday. I'll leave the artist here as well. And yeah, so their battles, they have a pretty like hard battle here again before. Again, they escape. The pretty beat up, but they do end up escaping, and they end up getting to go to the final battle, which again is not very fleshed out. Probably because I have so many ideas that I'm not keen to like box myself in on those ideas. But in general, like this is the whole idea. This video is very long. But yeah, in general, that's the whole story. I do plan on, if I ever make this as like a comic or maybe even a video series, that would be really cool. I do plan on having a little like what happens after this because it basically ends once the battle ends. The comic or story does. I do want to have kind of like a time skip and then what happened after, what happened to June and Caspin. Like, do they end up actually staying together? Does Joel end up staying together? What happens to Neil? Like that. I just want to have a satisfying like time skip ending. And that's probably where I'd leave the story. These characters are very important to me, as I'm sure you can hear. And yeah, I hope you liked the video, subscribe, and all that good stuff.